So today we are going to speak about section 8.2, which is immunity. So I had a technical glitch in the audio in the beginning of the video, so I decided to voice over only for the beginning. What is immunity and its types? The ability to fight against disease causing organisms is called immunity. Now, immunity is of two types: innate immunity and acquired immunity. Innate immunity and acquired immunity. Innate immunity has four variants and acquired immunity has two. So we'll look into each of them in detail. Innate immunity. So innate immunity is when it is called as a non-specific type of defense and it is present at the time of birth. So it is present at the time of birth and it is non-specific, meaning that antigens, no matter what is the shape of the antigens and how they look like, there will always be antibodies. There will always be antibodies produced in the body against these antigens. So they are exposed to wide variety of antigens and they're not specific to a particular antigen. Now, types of barriers in innate immunity. One of them is called as this physical barriers, which is skin. So now we're looking into all of them: physical barriers, physiological barriers, cellular barriers, and cytokine barriers. Physical barriers is skin. So you know that when skin is a barrier to all infections. So when a person is actually wounded, the person is actually exposed to a variety of diseases and pathogens. So that's why we always recommend a person taking a tetanus injection after they fall from cycle or have some injuries, especially little children. So skin is an important barrier to pathogens. And then we have mucus coating of the epithelium, which lines the respiratory, gastrointestinal, and urogenital tract that helps in trapping microorganisms. So this mucus layer actually helps in trapping the microorganisms. Then we have the physiological barriers. So tears from the eyes. So if a foreign object enters the eyes, our eyes start giving out tears, and this is how they release the foreign objects back into the outside environment. And then we have saliva from the mouth and acid in the stomach. Did you know that the pH of acid in stomach is around 2, so which is actually very important because to prevent growth of microbes. Then we have cellular barriers. So WBCs, monocytes, and macrophages. WBCs are called white blood cells, which are very important for the immunity. And monocytes actually enlarge and become macrophages. Monocytes are found in blood, macrophages in the tissue, and they're used to engulf the foreign objects in the body. Then we have cytokine barriers. So cells which are viral infected. For example, if there is a particular cell here, which is a virus infected cell, it will the non-infected cells will be adjacent to them. These non-infected cells do not carry virus. So when these virus infected cells actually produce a protein, which is actually called as interferon, they protect the non-infected cells from virus infection. So we have physical barriers, physiological barriers, cellular barriers, and cytokine barriers. So this is actually covered in innate immunity. Now we'll talk about acquired immunity. Acquired immunity is pathogen specific. Remember what I said about innate immunity, it is actually non-specific. So it means that whatever antigen is being produced into the body, there's a specific antibody released for that particular antigen. And this is not present from the time of birth. It is acquired during the lifetime. It is not present at the time of birth. So there's an important differentiation between acquired immunity and innate immunity. Innate immunity is non-specific. Acquired immunity is specific. Innate immunity is present at the time of birth. Acquired immunity is present not at the time of birth. So what kind of immunity is this? So this particular immunity comes when you encounter a disease or your vaccination. Now, what is this? What really happens to a body when it encounters disease? For example, this particular individual right here is actually having a disease of chickenpox. So there will be some antigens. So these antigens are nothing but chickenpox viruses. So the body will release antibodies against this chickenpox virus. So when a person is actually having a disease of chickenpox virus, antibodies will be released against the chickenpox virus. And when a person, and what is a vaccination actually? Vaccination is a weakened or dead pathogen. So, nevertheless, they are antigen itself. So, when an antigen enters a human body, this is through vaccination. Then the antibodies will be released against these weakened or dead pathogen. So, this type of immunity is acquired when you're encountering a disease or there's a vaccination involved. This means that our body, when it encounters a pathogen for the first time, produces a response called as primary response, which is of low intensity, and subsequent encounter with the same pathogen elicits a highly intensified secondary immune response. Now, immune response is carried out by B cells or B lymphocytes, otherwise it is referred to as, and T cells or T lymphocytes. Now, B cells produce antibodies and T cells do not produce antibodies, but they help the B cells to produce antibodies. This structure of an antibody is very important. It has come in my exam. I hope that you also read it thoroughly. So what is this antibody molecule? I drew this picture just like that. It's actually like this, if you write it in a stick form. So it has an antibody antigen binding site. It binds to antigen here. Okay, and it has two light chains. This two is referred to as light chain, and this whole thing is one heavy chain, and this is the second heavy chain. So it has two heavy chains and two light chains, and it is actually bonded together by disulfide bonds. So here we have each antibody molecule has two small light chains and two longer heavy chains. An antibody is represented as H2L2. H as in heavy chains, L as in light chains. Now, what are the types of antibodies here? They are IgA, M, E, and G. So here Ig refers to immunoglobulin, and it is common in everything, in all of this. But the only differential part is this IgM and E. How to remember these antibodies? Just remember them in the form of a word called as game. G for IgG, A for IgA, and subsequently for others. Now, types of immune response. There are two types of immune response: humoral response and cell-mediated immune response. Now, humoral response is mediated by B cells, and cell-mediated immune response is mediated by T cells. Now, graft rejection. Graft rejection is when, for example, if a person is actually has kidney failure and both the kidneys have failed, he will actually go through a kidney transplantation. Now, this particular kidney that we have got is a new kidney. It's from a donor, and this particular kidney is harmful to the person in some way because it's a foreign object. It's a foreign kidney. So the body will immediately produce antibodies or immune cells against this particular kidney, and it will damage the kidney. So this person, what they have to do is they have to take immunosuppressants all their life, because they have to deactivate their immunity level so that the antibodies are not produced against this particular kidney or particular organ. So the body is able to differentiate self and non-self. So the cell-mediated immune response is responsible for the graft rejection. Now we have looked into the innate immunity and we have learned till here, and now we are going to talk about acquired immunity, and we'll learn about active and passive immunity. So acquired immunity is about active immunity and passive immunity. So active immunity. This kind of immunity develops when body is exposed to antigens which may be living, that is through an infection or a disease, or dead microbes, which is through immunization or vaccination. So antibodies are produced by the body in this case. It's very important to understand that the antibodies in active immunity is produced by the body. Nobody is injecting antibodies to the body, but the antibodies are produced by the body itself. Only the antigens is being injected into the body. Antigen is otherwise also referred to as pathogen or a virus or a bacteria. Now, this is a slow process, but it's a long-lasting process, and it does not have side effects because an organism is actually producing antibodies on their own from their own body. Now, passive immunity. So, antibodies are directly given to the body. In the previous case, antigens are given to the body, and antibodies are produced by the body. In this case, antigens are directly given to the body. Okay, so this is because majorly in the case of fetus and mother, and it is fast and non-long lasting. Examples of passive immunity include antibodies received by the fetus from the mother through the placenta. And also during the lactation period, the colostrum in breast milk contains IgG antibodies received by the infant from the mother. So the infant receives antibodies from their mother during the pregnancy period, and also the injection of tetanus. So here the antibodies are given to a human being. In the previous case, only antigens are given to the human being. Now we look into vaccination and immunization. So the concept of vaccination purely depends on the memory. For example, this particular individual is not exposed to any virus. So the antigen will come. This is the first infection. So there the antigens will come and the person will have the disease, for example, chickenpox. Then the subsequent encounter with the antigen, what really happens is the antibodies are already produced against these antigens. So the person will not have chickenpox virus. Now what happens during vaccination? In vaccination, a person gets there's a weakened or deactivated pathogen. So the person is receiving deactivated pathogen, which is not causing any disease to the human being, this particular human being. Because of the deactivated pathogen, antibodies will be released. And if a person gets encountered again with the same chickenpox virus or antigen, this particular antigen, it has already antibodies inside the body. So it will fight against this antigen and this person will not have chickenpox virus. So this is the property of memory in vaccination and immunization. So inactivated or weakened pathogen or deactivated pathogen are introduced into the body. The vaccine thus generates antibodies that neutralize the pathogen during actual infection. It also generates memory B cells and T cells that recognize the pathogen on subsequent exposure and elicit an immune response. An example of vaccine produced by recombinant DNA technology include hepatitis B vaccine. Now we look into allergies. The exaggerated response of an immune system against an antigen is called as allergy. And here we are not referring to this particular causing elements as antigens, we are calling them as allergens. So the antibodies involved in this particular case is actually an IgE antibodies. Examples of allergens include mites in dust, pollens, and animal dander. Because of that, we actually get sneezing, coughing, and watery eyes, running nose, and sometimes asthma, like difficulty in breathing. Okay, so basically, in this case, an allergy, what really happens is this is a mast cell, and there are antibodies situated around it. And these antibodies are actually an IgE antibody. So this particular antibody will come and encounter some allergens. They will come and encounter with some allergens. And the mast cell has some histamine and serotonin, histamine and serotonin will be released from the mast cells, and which actually gives symptoms such as inflammation, redness, and such kind of symptoms in allergy and itching. So it is because of the histamine and serotonin. Okay. So cause of allergy is that it is due to the release of chemicals like histamine and serotonin from the mast cells. Diagnosis for this is, for determining the cause of allergy, the patient is exposed to very small doses of the allergen. Okay, and the reactions will be studied. Treatment. The use of drugs such as antihistamine, adrenaline, steroids actually are taken to reduce the symptoms of allergy, which can be inflammation, redness, itching. Autoimmunity. So it is a state where body loses the ability to distinguish between self and non-self cells. So the body's immune system goes off track and starts destroying its own cells. It starts fighting against its own cells, which is quite dangerous. And this results in a autoimmune disease called as, one of them is rheumatoid arthritis. So the body fights against their own cells. It becomes enemy to itself. It causes autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis. So immune system in the body. So we'll look into lymphoid organs. There are two types of lymphoid organs. One is primary lymphoid organs. Second is secondary lymphoid organs. So in primary lymphoid organs, we are going to look into bone marrow and thymus. And secondary lymphoid organs, we are going to look into spleen, lymph nodes, and mucosal associated lymphoid tissue. Primary lymphoid organs. So we have bone marrow and thymus. So the origin and maturation of the lymphocytes, or origin and maturation of B and T cells, take place in the primary lymphoid organs. So they include the bone marrow and thymus. Bone marrow is where the B cells maturate and originate. And in thymus, this is particularly located near the heart. And it is actually large at the time of birth, but with age it becomes very small. So growth and maturation of T cells take place in the thymus. So T cells, thymus, B cells, bone marrow. B for B cells, T for T cells. Secondary lymphoid organs. So we have spleen, lymph nodes, and malt in this case. So spleen, it is a large bean-shaped organ, and it is used to filter the blood-borne microbes. So it filters the blood by trapping blood-borne microbes. Lymph nodes, a person will actually have lymph node elements across, in and around their body. They'll have in certain points. These are actually called as lymph nodes, and they the trapped antigens or microbes activate the lymphocytes present there. So their function is to trap microbes that enter the lymph, and the trapped antigens or microbes activate the lymphocytes present there and cause the immune response. MALT. It is a mucosal associated lymphoid tissue. It is located within the lining of the major tracts, which is respiratory tract, digestive tract, and urogenitical tracts. So it is actually located within the lining of these major tracts. Thank you for watching. I hope you understood everything. And if there's any doubt, you can actually write it in the comments down below. Thank you.